Yeah, I just wanted on the comments that people were making before is the correcting. I think Joan Vickers wrote about that. Is that you have a line of acceptable, what you accept, and talking about telling people are terrific and all this for doing not that great of a thing. You don't comment to anybody, like if it's just like this, you accept that people are going to be, making mistakes, making good plays. They don't need to hear about that all the time. When a player makes an incredible play, then, that's when you make a comment. And when they make just a really bonehead play that they should know better, you have to talk to them about that too, like the way Bob said. And so I think that's true. And my friend Johanni, he went to a big factory in Finland, and he was talking to the guy. And the guy told him, he says, I want my workers to give 100%, 80% of the time. Because you basically you can't be 100% all the time. Like someone needs to take your eyes off, they got to put down their pen at the desk or off the computer. They got to go get a drink of water. They got to do this. And, that you have to accept that people have to, there's a little recovery and all that sort of thing. And if you accept that, then they're going to work harder for you. That, they're not looking over their shoulder all the time. I remember my first job on a Earl Grey golf course, and the boss, he'd come streaking over the hills, in the Toro. He's driving around and he keep threatening to fire us all the time because we'd have been working for 45 minutes, doing something, and just stand there and take a little breather and wipe your brow, and he just happened to see you then. And that just created I don't know, just a terrible atmosphere. So, you have to accept that people they're not going to be 100% all the time. And the other thing is a lawnmower parents. That's a change in parents. And I see this. I have 3 daughters. I see this. They don't want their kids to experience any bad thing, so that they preempt everything with making sure everything's going to be absolutely perfect. And then when something bad does happen, it's just so traumatic. And I think, and that's a term that people use right now for the parenting is lawnmower parents. And I think so. We get them in the hockey, and we've got to deal with that kind of thing. I remember once on the bench, I was coaching girls midget, and this guy being a really good minor pro guy, and he moved up from the States. His daughter's in grade 12, and he moved her to Calgary. So of course now she has no friends, her graduating class and all this kind of stuff. And he was having some trouble with her at home. So he came into the timekeeper bench right beside our bench, and he was staring at our bench the whole time. And my female coaches were just getting just really intimidated by this guy. And I talked to him after, and I said, well, what were you doing? And he said, well, I got to have a right to know what's going on in the bench. And I said, yeah, but I said, you played hockey. You don't sit there and stare in the bench and scare the hell out of my coaches and all this kind of stuff. But that's the sort of thing that parents can do sometimes. That was kind of an exceptional thing, but anyways, that's my 2 cents worth here.
Rick, did you have any parents do that on your bench? Go ahead, Rick.
Not for very long. I would be like Bob. I would be the guy in their face right away and let them know that
Yeah.
Well, I did too.
that's
called
just
them.
not acceptable.
What the hell were you doing?
You know, over the years, and I agree with a lot of what's been said this morning, but on the idea of the more recent discussion, I mean, since I started coaching in the early 80s, the longest memory of a coach or a parent reaction to is at the end of the season when they come to me and say, any chance you'd want to keep him for the summer? And my reaction was, well, why would you say that? Well, he's so good for you. And my reaction back, well, it's not that hard. We have our standards. We have accepted behaviors and unacceptable behaviors and consequences that go with the unaccepted ones. And for me, the most important part of that whole thing is we enforce it. And that's what I don't see and have not seen consistently across the board at all levels of society. From the parents to coaches to minor hockey associations to regional associations and right into society. No one is willing enough nowadays to enforce the consequences. And make sure that it's understood these behaviors are not acceptable and they will not be tolerated. The kids just have risen in a society that says whatever you want to do is acceptable. And strangely enough, when they get in an environment, for instance, when in my team environment, when they understand the rules and they understand that they're going to be enforced, they're quite agreeable to it. In fact, they seem to relish it. Life is now simple. I don't have to make a lot of decisions that may or not get me in trouble, and I may or may not have to deal with things. I don't know how you correct that. It's so ingrained in society nowadays, and you know the whole politically correct thing, and now the cancel culture and all of that. Not to say that some of the things that the cancel culture is opposing and fighting against are tolerable. It's just to say that it's swung way too far in another direction. But I'm getting off on a tangent here. Basically, as a coach, if you have kids that are misbehaving, players that are misbehaving, that are not living up to standards, you need to address it with them. If you have parents that are crossing the line, you can't shy away from it. You can't turn the other cheek. You can't turn the other way. You have to address it, and that usually puts an end to it. And Wally, you know, with my code of conduct, the one that you think is good to a point, but not so much, that's my starting point. And that usually puts an end to it. And Wally, you know, with my code of conduct, the one that you think is good to a point, but not so much, that's my starting point. I address that head up, right at the beginning. And then the first one that tries to challenge it, we deal with it. And that usually puts it to rest for the greater part of the season. Al, I think you're on the right track. I think I've heard you speak to something similar, and you address situations that happen in your organization and put an end to it. But if you turn the other cheek, now it's tolerable. Now it magnifies, because if somebody else can do it, then I can do it, and then they'll do it. Bit of a rant, fellas, but that's where I'm coming from on this.
I have a question, Rick. I think every coach wants to do that. That having the skill, the art of coaching to do that. It's just you're not born with it. It takes a lot of experience. Have you ever encountered, Rick, leadership above you to interfere with your approach? Have they interfered with it? Have you had to deal with them? Because I think the ability to make what you're saying happen will rest with the elected volunteer board of any association. Have you had to deal with those issues, or was your generation of coaching like mine? That's the way we were brought up, and it was easy to reinforce.
No, I coached, well, I've coached since the early 80s till not too long ago, so I've lived through a lot of that stuff, and I have had association executives challenge me, and I've pretty much told them that that's what we agreed to do when we started, and that's the agreement I had with our parents and players when we met at the start of the year, and I'm prepared to live through that. Pardon me. I was never relieved of a job midstream, but I wasn't invited back a couple of times either. In my last year coaching midget AAA, I cut the son of the president of the association. So I knew pretty much after that I was done at the end of the year anyways.
Yeah.
But that didn't faze me. I mean, I'm not bragging or anything. I'm just saying that's the way I operate. And if I can't function that way, then I can't do the job to the best of my ability, in which case I shouldn't be here. And
we have to be true.
graciously enough, they allowed me to complete a season each and every time. But you do have to have the wherewithal, Wally, I'll use my word,
Yeah.
to be that bold and be that upfront about things.
Well, you have to be true to yourself, I think, Rick.
Exactly.
Like I often say that our world has become a fast food world. We want as much as we can get, as cheap as we can get it, as fast as we can get it, with the least amount of resistance and the least amount of confrontation that we can have. And our kids are being raised that way. And it's not earn what you get or put an effort forth to get something. It'll be handed to you. I know my parents wanted me to have more than they had. I wanted my kids to have more than I had, and my kids want their kids to have more than they had. And that's just that's nature. And I think we've gone so far the other way where kids don't have to earn things. Now the parents provide, right? Not only that, they fight their battles for them. It's it's unbelievable. I don't know where we're headed with this. I mean, and as a coach, sometimes I think the coaches are afraid to speak up for what they believe because now they're going to have a confrontation with a parent, and they don't want to have a confrontation with a parent.
Agreed. You know, on the topic of players, Bob, that you brought up, you know, making demands before they're even trying out, never mind being selected. I had the same thing at midget AAA, and I was very matter of fact. This is the way we operate our team. Everybody's going to earn their spot on the team. I always, right at the front end of our tryout camp, told our players, especially the returning players, it's not my job to protect your spot. That's your job. If a new guy wants to come in and outwork you and outskill you, you're going to have to deal with that. That's not my problem at all. I'll just decide who's gonna win that competition, and you're just going to have to look after yourself.
Yeah. Well, at competitive levels, I think players decide how much ice time they get. The coach doesn't. The player decides how much he's going to earn, and I think that's Daryl Sutter's message right now.
I agree.
You will decide how much ice time you're going to have, whether you're going to pay on the power play. I know he gives little carrots. Like he give Monahan a little carrot to get out and kill penalties because he was rewarding him for some effort. You know, he makes these little subtle comments that he's telling the players basically, you will get what you earn, and you'll decide. He's not making a decision for them. And I think these last 10 or 11 games, whatever they got to play, is going to reveal a lot about what he has and what he wants to have back.
And what he's going to take forward.
Yeah, which players are going to buy in is going to reveal a lot of character or a lot of lack of character here in the next 10 or 11 games.
I think what's interesting, what we're talking about, you know, taking the high road, and I agree with you completely, Bob. It's, you know, everything wants everyone wants everything instantly, and wants to be told they're great for it, and to take the different path and take the high road. That's one of my favorite quotes to use with my team, right? There's no traffic on the high road. There's never any traffic up there. And people always want to pull you down, like a crab in the bucket, right? And that's, so when you do take that high road, and I think that's the biggest challenge for, when you look at, say, a 10-year-old girl or 11-year-old girl who probably up until that point hasn't been forced by society or hasn't noticed by society that she's got to be or act or something a certain way. And you guys all know what I'm talking about. And somewhere around the age of 10, they start looking at the magazines or the whatever and go, "Ooh, am I supposed to do that? Is that me?" And again, it's so much easier to regress to the mean and assimilate and just be like everyone else, and to take the high road and stand apart and be a little different because of the things you do, you choose to do, I think is incredibly hard, especially for, again, in my experience, those girls in that, sort of bantam age group, the grade 8 and 9, that's in my experience in female hockey, the ages they sort of decide I'd love to have a scholarship and this is what I really am focused on, or hey, I like something else better. But it's incredibly hard, I think, for the girls, and it's so much easier to just let yourself be pulled back down into the bucket by the rest of the crabs than it is to stand apart. And I don't know what the solution is, at least not on a grand scale. Hopefully I do right by my kids that way, but it's just again and again you see these. There's a dramatic change from a peewee girl to a bantam girl. And they do everything a little bit differently, and they, before they do anything in bantam, they kind of look around a little bit and say, okay, what are we gonna do? It's like they look around to see what the we is before they just go and compete for that puck or do things a certain way. So it's pretty fascinating. But I think on the girls' side, it's that 10, 11, 12, 13 where all of a sudden they care a lot more, and it's much easier for them to take the low road or be pulled back down into the bucket.
Kim, you did the mission statement exercise with your junior girls, I think. And you
Yes.
said that one of the girls, if you can recall that story, brought it up at the supper table. That girl would have been 16 or 17. And it blew the parents and the brother away, or the family away, the discussion that she had. Do you recall sharing that story?
Sure. Well, we went through it in a pretty stepwise approach because we did it during a pandemic. So we couldn't necessarily get everyone in the room and do it sort of all in one shot as we might have liked to. So, we did something very similar to what I went through with you, Wally, as a team in person, but then very quickly got shut down. So it became sort of more of a virtual thing. But as we were working through it, one of the players who has actually played for me for a while, this was the first time we sort of did this where I didn't dictate to them what our mission and values were. Like, we came upon it together. And she was talking about it at dinner, and her parents were struck by the fact that I'd coached her for 4 or 5 years, and she'd never really been as passionate or as take as much ownership of the identity of the team as she did in this year. And it's because they were part of it, and they helped us create it. We weren't able to include the parents in the process, mostly because of the COVID scenario. But they really felt a completely different degree of ownership. And when I used what they agreed upon in emails or in front of them on the ice, their posture changed, the way their eyes looked changed. Everything changed when I used that agreed upon mission statement or phrasing in practice. So it had a tremendous effect, and it wasn't like I was saving them from a bad culture. Like, we had a pretty good culture going into doing this. It wasn't like that was necessarily a weak spot of ours. but it was completely different when they were in it and choosing it for themselves versus myself and my assistant coaches choosing it and dictating it to them. So it really had a huge power, and the girls would bring it up, at home, and that's actually quite common. And the parents, often tell me that they feel like their daughters are teaching them when they're being coached by me as well. So I guess hopefully all for the good.
Thank you very much for that. Gives me some new life trying to pursue that exercise, because I've approached Hockey Alberta to pilot that project in a formal way. I wanted their approval to do it with all the course conductors of clinics. And if I don't get that approval, I've really been working behind the scenes on it in a very politically correct manner. And if I don't get approval, I'm going to do it independently. And exactly what you said, if the players at that age are educating the parents because it worked for them, then it's going to work. And it's something that coaches can be educated to do. So hopefully it'll get there, but I'm still working on it. But Rick, as usual, I've highlighted what you've said. You seem to summarize things pretty well and hit the nail on the head. And I've got tons of things to edit. We just about at 2 hours and 30 minutes. And I hope Tim Bothwell's back in town next week. And I'm not sure. I'm really disappointed that the female worlds didn't happen. But now, Tim, you got your hand up, or Bobby?
Just going to say I should be back next week. I'm supposed to leave tomorrow morning.
Okay.
We're just waiting on word of whether Finland had approached us to see if we want to play some games next weekend. So if I don't hear before midnight tonight, then I'll be flying out tomorrow.